Hello everyone, this is Dr. Jabber. This is chapter 2 for software engineering, understanding the requirements engineering. I will be covering in these slides, these areas here. So I'll talk about software requirements and how to collect the requirements. This is the second one. And then how to write effective requirements. And then I will discuss at the end how to manage the software requirements and talk about some of the tools that are used. Let's start with the software, defining the software requirements. So software requirements usually defines the features, the functions, and the constraints of a software system. It is used to also it specifies. It specifies what the software should do, how it should perform, and any limitations it must follow. Okay, there are different types of software requirements, so I will cover those types. I'll start with the first one, functional requirements. The functional requirements is mainly you are specifying the behavior or the actions the software should perform. I'm giving an example here. So if you are writing requirements for user authentication, user wants to log into the system, etc. So you will specify the requirements there. And then for data processing and transaction handling, if the software is going to generate some reports, so these are functional requirements. Again, how's transactions, what type of transactions that are need to occur in the system, etc. The second one is the non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirements mainly is attributes or characteristics that it describes how the software should operate. So these are how the system is going to behave actually, and those are related to performance and scalability, how you can the system grows, if the system start growing up and down, etc. Security features, usability, how the system is going to use. Is it going to be 24 hours, 7 days a week? Reliability, how reliable is the system? So anything in these areas, performance, scalability, security, usability, and reliability. So this is mainly, those are non-functional requirements. But the functional requirements, this is a behavior, what the system is going, to do with the system mainly. There are several categories for requirements. The first one is the business requirements. Business requirements is mainly to specify the goals actually of the software. For example, here, so one of the requirements could be to increase customer engagement. I mean, these requirements mainly to increase customer engagement, improve operational efficiency, or support new business models. Now, and I have, yeah, so this is also translated in Arabic. Now, the second one is user requirements. User requirements is the end user. What are the features that the user is going to interact with? Now, the difference between the business and the user requirements, business is mainly what is the value that, these requirements are bringing to the customer. For example, to increase their engagement, improve their improve the transactions, processing, etc. But the second one mainly here is that what how the system is going to interact with the system. For example, user should be able to reset their password, right? Because the user wants to create a password, reset the password. User also wants to be able to view transaction histories, for example, or access mobile-friendly features. So these are requirements for these are user requirements at the end user is going to use. What the user is going to use as features are considered user requirements. The third one is the system requirements, which is technical or hardware specification. Like, for example, that the system must run when you must use Windows 8 or Windows 10 or 11, and the system should be 8 gigabytes, etc. And the type of database that's also used. Number four is that interface requirements. If your system is going to interact with another system, okay, so you will specify those requirements. So here is mainly for integrating with other systems or using APIs. The system, an example here, the system must integrate with a payment gateway, because if your application that you wanted the user to make a payment, for example, so you need to integrate it with a system that allows the user to enter their credit card and charge the user here. The third one, the fifth is regulatory requirements. These are compliance with laws and regulations. And there are sometimes, rules and regulations from government or from like medical medical domain, etc. So, for example, here the system must comply with the GDPR for data protection. So there is also the second one is like HIPAA here. If we this is big one here. So HIPAA, they define standards. This is for the health system. So that if you are developing a program or you're writing a program, okay, for the health system, you must make sure that you comply with the requirements that comes in from HIPAA, for example. Now, this is a new topic here, and the importance of so why do we care about software requirements? What's the importance here? Because they guide the development and testing. Look, when we define the requirements for the system, they are used by the developer, right, to write the code, and used by the one who is going to test the system to test it. So it guides the development process, and then also it aligns the stakeholders with the expectations. It also like it makes sure that all of the stakeholders, the customers, the people who are writing the code, the business, the people who are sponsoring the project, etc. Okay, they are all kind of on the same page. They all understand what is the system is going to do and what is the system is not going to do. And also, it helps the project planning. Yes, because also for to plan the project, if we decide to go ahead and develop the project, okay, knowing the requirements, it helps us how much work is needed, who's going to be doing what, etc. Now, another topic here is how do we write effective requirements? How do we write good requirements mainly? They have to be clear and precise. They have to be very clear. Anybody can understand. And they have to be also testable and measurable. You have to write a requirement that we can test it. If we cannot test it, I mean, how could we prove that this requirement is good or bad, or if we did it or not did it, or we didn't do it? They have to be achievable, that it can be implemented achievable. Like if you put the requirements where the developers cannot write it, or there is no software can do it, there is no technology to do it, so this is not going to work. It has to be achievable, and then it has to be also traceable. What we mean by traceable, like when you define a requirement, then you take it to the people, the person who's going to design the code, and or the people also who's going to write the code, etc. So I can trace the requirements. So if I look at the requirements, I have to see that I can link it to the design. I can see how I can move it from the requirements to the design, and then from design to the code, etc., to the testing. So it has to be traceable. That's what traceable means. Now this is an important subject. This is now we are trying to cover how to collect the requirement. This is what's eliciting requirements. Okay, now, okay, earlier we mentioned that how to write good requirements, but now how are we going to get those requirements? Where do we gonna get it from? What are the techniques? And that's what I will be covering here. So mainly collecting requirements is the focus here is to gather the information to meet the stakeholder expectations. And this is a very important software engineering because the requirements that we need to collect, it has to meet the stakeholders expectations. Now, the second one is effective illustration or needs strong communication. A person that who is going to collect the requirements must have a strong communications. They can communicate very well. They use a systematic approach. They use techniques to come up with those to collect those requirements, and they use also the right tools to collect those requirements. It is a challenging, the third one here, it's a challenging, collecting the requirements is very challenging actually, because what happens sometimes the stakeholder doesn't know exactly what they want. So you have to be good enough if you are the one who's collecting the requirements, okay, to be able to work with the customer to so that you guys together, okay, can define the requirements here, okay. So that's also it's a challenging. Now, I forgot to mention that, in the software development team, who collects the requirements? We, in the traditional way for developing software or old way, I think, here, we call it the business analyst or the system engineer. So this is different than from the one who's writing the code, which is we call it developer or the one who tests the code. So the person that who collects the requirements and define the requirements, we call them business analysts or system engineers. Okay, so these are techniques now. Okay, so we defined, what is the value of collecting requirements, what's the specifications here. But mainly now we are trying to define in this slide what are the techniques. Suppose that you are going to go ahead and collect requirements for your program or your project. How do you do that? What are the techniques you use? The first one is interviews. Interviews, you go to the person that who wants you, if there is a customer wants you to write a program for them, so you go meet them face to face, and then you start talking to them and come and writing the requirements. Or workshops. Okay, sometimes you schedule a session, you schedule a meeting, and then you bring the people that they wanted this program or project. Okay, and also you bring from your side some of the technical people, so you all together in one room, okay, talking to each other to define the requirements. The third one is using surveys or questionnaires. Sometimes we send a survey so that in the internet you may send a survey to many people, they fill the survey, yeah, or a questionnaire, and then you define the requirements this way. Another one is a prototyping. Prototyping is that, okay, so you talk to the customer, so they give you, like, suppose the customer comes back, okay, I want the system to be to allow me to do a reset. I can reset password. So you go there, you go talk to the developer. The developer is going to write the code, not full code, just some part of the code that it shows a screen where the user can enter the name and the password, etc. And then you go to the customer and show it to them, and they can click there, here, there, etc. So they see how it looks, and those are kind of prototyping. And then the other one is that observation. Sometimes if you're writing requirements like, for a factory, for somebody, working in the factory, that there is a process that they use. So you go to the factory or you go to the company and you see people what they do. By knowing what they're doing, so you will be right capturing the requirements and writing the requirements. Another one is documenting analysis. Okay, this one is that you go back and look some of the existing maybe material or some of the existing projects that are similar to your project, so that you can borrow from there some of those requirements, some of those regulations or business documents, etc. The focus groups is another way. Focus groups is mainly, again, it's kind of similar to the brain to workshop which I mentioned earlier, but focus groups here is mainly you bring people that who are experts and they know about the system, and they have the knowledge. Okay, so you bring them all together and then you start talking to them and then collecting the requirements. There is another technique which is called storyboarding. This one here is that you look at the problems that the user has of using the system, and then you start defining the requirements to solve those problems, which we call them pain points. And then another one, which is brainstorming. Brainstorming is the same, as also similar to the focus group or the workshops. You bring everybody, and technical people and the customers, etc. You bring them all together in one room, and again, and then everybody starts, contributing, and then you start asking, what do you think the system should do here, etc. So you start, collecting those requirements. Right. Moving on, writing effective software requirements here. These are, it's very important requirements when you write the requirements, okay, how they should look like, etc. They should define what the software must do. If you want to write the requirement, you have to make sure that those requirements, it defines what the system is going to do, or the software. Also, it should it also it you define them to guide the developers, to tell the developers, the testers, and the stakeholders what they need to do. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, so it's like this slide is repeating to some of the information which I covered earlier. So they need to be clear, precise, and anybody can understand them. And there is an example here. So for example, here I like this example. Instead of saying the system should be fast, okay, so when you say fast, okay, how fast? So this requirement, if you write it this way, this is not good. But if you say the system should process up to 100 transactions per second, okay? So here you're specifying is exactly how the system is fast, and that's very clear. All right, now what kind of templates we should use to or are used to for writing the requirements? There are two templates commonly mostly used. One of them is called the traditional way, and the second one is called the agile way. Okay, and mostly the people they use the agile way. By the way, this is I'm going to give you a homework in this one here, so you have to be careful and listen carefully here. So the traditional way, okay, there is a certain template. Look in bold here. Okay, so the system, this is how you write the system shall. and then you specify what the system is going to do. So that's the system. You always start with, look at the example, the system shall, okay, this is always you use the system shall, and then you specify what the system is going to do. So the system shall allow users to log in using a username and a password. So this side here, this one here, okay, going back now, it's hard to go back. Okay, okay. Anyway, so I will cover it. It's hard for me to go back because I pressed a wrong key here. But anyway, I can cover that. So the first one is use the system shell, and then specify what's needed. The agile way, okay, it says there is a template as a user, and you always use the as a. I'll show an example. Okay, very good. You always use as a, and then you specify what the user as a user what needs to be doing, or the user or the person that's going to do to use the software, and then you say what they are as a user. I want to be able to do something, and what is the value, so that, okay, I will explain, I'll show that in the example. Okay, so this one, let's look at this example. I'm not going to cover all the slides here, you can read them, but look at this one here. These are different requirements for user authentication. Okay, look, there are three requirements. One, two, three. The system shall, everything starts, the system shall require a valid PAN. The system shall, okay, lock the user's account, etc. The system shall allow the users to reset their password. So for user authentication, these are three requirements. For account balance, like, by the way, this is like if you are using, if you are developing the software for an ATM machine, like, the machine where you can, I mean, you'll get money, okay, using your card, a bank card, okay, and then the system, the ATM shall display, etc. So I'll let you guys read this, okay, and it's easy to understand. So moving on, this is another, this is cache how the system is going to withdraw. So we have these three requirements, and then number four, okay, again, also this is for getting the receipt, etc. Okay, again, number five, six, so five and six, seven, all of these requirements that uses the traditional way, one way. Now, this is the second way, which I told you about it. This is called the agile, which is commonly used, mostly used. And look at the system here. Each one of those, like user authentication, look at these three requirements. As a, okay, and then you specify who's you're using this requirement. Here is the user. As a user, as a is part of the template. You must, every requirement start with as you see in these requirements, as a. But this, after that, you say who's going to use the requirement here, user, as a user, and then I want. Look at this in requirement one, requirement two. Always I want is always part of the template. But then after that, you specify what you want to do. So the user will say, I want to enter my PIN. So the user is going to use it. Now there is also so that. You see the word so that. In each requirement, you see the word so that. Okay, you see here so that in the second request, so that. So that what? This is the benefit. Why do I need, to do this? So this is, okay, I am the user. As a user, I wanted to enter my passport. This is what I want to do with the software. But why do I need to do it? This is you are answering the question, why you doing it? So why do I need to enter my PIN? Because it's so that you can replace it by the word because I can securely access my account. So think of so that as using the word because. And again, as a user, I want the ATM machine to lock my account after so that why? My account remains secure. So this is how you continue writing those requirements. So this is related to the user authentication. So I'm using the same example actually. So I showed you how to write it using the traditional way, and I'm showing you the example how to use the agile way. So agile way is always used as a, and then you specify who's the one using it. I want, this is part of the template. I want to do what, this is what is listed there as part of the requirements, and then also why. So mainly the requirement, if you think about it, it starts after I want. After I want, this is what the system is going to do. Okay, this is what the system has to provide to the user, and this is the value y. So between after the want, you specify what the system is going to do, and then that's used for the user. Why? Because the user wants to use that, and then so that. So I'm not gonna go cover the. I'm not gonna cover all of these here, so because this will take time. So you look at the example, read the example. If you have a question, you can ask me. Okay, now I'm moving to a new topic, and as part of the lecture today, managing changing requirements. Now, okay, for the requirements, like we define the requirements. Now, how the requirements is going to change? Like after we started writing the code and developing the program and etc., the customer comes and I mean they need some requirements to be changed or they need to add more requirements. Okay, so this is very careful. We have to define a process, otherwise it becomes hard to control the software. So this is mainly, okay, you have the company, they have to define a process, okay, for the customer when they want to change requirements or they want to add more requirements. That's mainly what this section in the lecture is about. So when managing, okay, so there is one way for managing how to control the change. If a customer wants to change requirements, how do we deal with that? How do we do it? How do we handle that? So there are some steps here. Okay, one of this is an example, by the way. This is one, I mean, can be a process. You can define, you can use this as a process. Mainly, okay, you define something. There is a change request. It's like there is a template, okay, or a template or a form that the user has to fill that template to specify what they need to change or what they need to add, and then that template. There is the company. They will have a team usually to review those customer requests. So which is we call it change control board. So they identify like I mean a group of people at the company so that all of those change requests, okay, will be reviewed by the CCB, which we call it change control board. And then after they review them and then they define the impact. Okay, either they approve it, which is yeah, this is fine, we can do it, or they reject it. They go back to the customer say no, we cannot do it because there is a big impact here. We're not going to do it. All right, so this is an example here. I'm not going to go through the example because I don't want to make the recording too much here because it's hard for you to upload to download and read the slides. But this is an example. You can read it. Again, okay, so this is some of the, yeah, when as I mentioned, okay, the customer, okay, is going to fill a form, and then the form is going to go to the change control board. The change control board, they ask the project manager usually to do some analysis. They need to know, okay, evaluate how big is the impact, what is going to, so the team, okay, if we are going to add this requirement or change this requirement, what is going to impact? Is the timeline for the project is going to be more now? Do we need more money because we need to add people to write those requirements, etc. So we have to do a lot of analysis here so that we can tell the customer what to do. So we have to assess the impact in the design. What is the impact? Do we need to change code? Do we need to change the design? Do we need more people to test, etc.? So we have to do analysis for anything that the customer is asking, okay, to request. Because we already, when we started the project, we agreed with the customer that we will do these requirements. But after we start writing the code and doing the design, the customer comes with the new requirements. We have to analyze it and see the impact in the impact. Okay, there is another thing, which is the last thing actually here. This is a slide. There is a big concept. You need to know this one. This is called the scope creep. The scope creep. This is commonly known in software requirements engineering. The scope creep, like this is what is mainly the scope creep. This is like if the customer continues to come back after we define the requirement and we agree with the customer in this. Okay, the customer keeps coming back. We started writing the code, etc., and doing the design, but the customer keeps coming with requirements. If we take these requirements and agree to that, and then go ahead develop those requirements and add them to the system, this is becomes what's called scope creep. Scope creep is mainly like after you define the requirements, as you start adding more requirements without any control. So there is no control here. So this is going to become like, this is what is referred to as a scope creep. And then how do we deal with the scope creep? Because scope creep is not good because we define the requirements. Now you are adding more and more. There is time, there is cost, there's a lot of things changing here. Okay, so how do we stop that? There are some ways to stop it. If you are using the change control process, you remember in the previous slides, there is a process where the user had to fill a form, and then after filling the form, we have a committee that is going to review the form and then assess the impacts, and then they decide either to accept or reject those requirements here. Okay, so using a change control process, it will help, okay, of stopping the scope creep. That's very important here. So there is also an example here, okay, that you guys can read. All right, now this is the last slide here, which is that, okay, what are the common tools? What are the tools that are mainly used or should be used as part of the one of the tools? This is the list of tools. There are many, but some of them is called Jira, Trello, etc. So these are tools that exist in the industry that people can use it. Okay, now